Get your pathetic face off the floor and get into that kitchen right now. My mother is hungry, and if I don't see a 3-course meal on this table in 30 minutes, I'll give you a reason to actually cry. Dominic's voice sliced through the air like a serrated blade. I felt the metallic sting of blood in my mouth where my cheek had just collided with the hardwood floor. I didn't move. I just stared at the expensive Italian loafers he had bought with my credit card, now standing inches from my face. "Did you hear him, Scarlett?" Beatrice's voice drifted in from the living room, dripping with staged aristocratic boredom. "We've been waiting for hours. It's 10:30 p.m. A decent wife doesn't let her family starve just because she was busy at the office." "You're becoming quite selfish, dear." "I was closing a $120,000 acquisition, Beatrice," I whispered, my voice raspy but steady. I pushed myself up, feeling the heat of a massive bruise forming on my jaw. "The money that pays for your Botox and Madison's $15,000 shopping spree at Saks last week." Slap. The second hit was faster. Dominic grabbed my hair, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were bloodshot from the expensive scotch he'd been drinking all afternoon. "I don't care about your business. You are my wife. Your primary job is to serve this family. Now move!" I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man I had supported for 3 years. The man who lost his job a month after our wedding and never looked for another. The man who invited his toxic mother and bratty sister to live in my Manhattan penthouse, turning my sanctuary into a prison. "Fine," I said, a terrifyingly calm smile spreading across my lips. "I'll give you exactly what you deserve." The kitchen was cold, mirroring the ice flowing through my veins. Outside, a brutal New York blizzard was howling, burying the city in white. The wind rattled the glass, but it was nothing compared to the storm I had been brewing for the last 6 months. I didn't reach for the pans. Instead, I reached for a hidden folder behind the pantry. I walked back into the dining room. Dominic was sitting at the head of the mahogany table, looking like a king on a stolen throne. Madison was scrolling through her phone, her feet up on the velvet chairs. "Where's the food?" Madison groaned. "I'm starving, and I need another $4,000 for a dress, Scarlett. Don't be a bitch about it." "Dinner is served," I said, throwing the legal documents onto the table. The sound was like a gunshot. Dominic frowned. "What the hell is this? Notice of eviction?" "Keep reading, Dominic. The second page is even better. It's a forensic audit of the account you used to funnel $85,000 of my money to your mistress. I believe the NYPD calls that grand larceny." The color drained from his face. Beatrice snatched the papers, her eyes bulging. "This is a mistake. You can't evict us. We are family." "Family?" I laughed. "Family doesn't use me as a punching bag. Check the corner of the ceiling, Dominic. High-definition cameras. Every word you've said, every hit you've landed, has been uploaded to a cloud server. My lawyer, Marcus, is watching the live feed. If you touch me again, the police, who are already downstairs, will be through that door in 10 seconds. He froze. The power dynamic shifted violently. "You have 5 minutes," I whispered. "The suitcase you came with is by the door. Beatrice, your bags are in the hallway. Madison, keep the shoes. Consider them a gift for the long walk you're about to take." "It's a blizzard outside," Beatrice stammered. "You can't throw us out in 7 inches of snow." "Actually," I checked my watch, "it's my penthouse. My rules. And you are all trespassing." I threw the front door open, letting the freezing New York wind swirl in. "Your 5 minutes start now." "You're bluffing," Dominic hissed, though his trembling hands betrayed him as he gripped the eviction notice. "You don't have the guts to throw us out in this weather. You're a provider, Scarlett. You're the one who keeps this roof over our heads because you're terrified of being alone. I leaned against the cold marble countertop, watching him with a detachment that seemed to unsettle him more than my anger ever had. Terrified of being alone? Dominic, I've been alone since the day I said I do. I've been a bank account to you, a servant to your mother, and a safety net for your sister. But the one thing I haven't been is a fool. Beatrice was frantically flipping through the audit reports I had tossed on the table. This is impossible. $85,000? Dominic, tell her she's lying. Tell her you didn't spend our security on some penthouse floozy. Dominic didn't answer. He couldn't. The numbers were black and white, tracked from my business dividends to a shell company he thought I wouldn't notice, and finally to a jewelry store on Fifth Avenue and a luxury apartment lease in Brooklyn for a girl named Chloe. He didn't spend your security, Beatrice. I corrected her, my voice as sharp as a razor. He spent my sweat and blood. While I was working 18-hour shifts to build my firm, he was playing house with a 22-year-old. And while you were complaining about the thread count of the guest room sheets, you were both living on stolen time. 6 months ago, I had found a stray receipt in Dominic's coat pocket for a diamond necklace worth $12,500. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. Instead, I called Marcus. We didn't just build a case. We built a fortress of paper. Every unauthorized transfer, every forged signature on my checks, every cent Madison swiped from the emergency drawer, it was all logged, time-stamped, and notarized. I gave you everything! Madison shrieked, finally dropping her phone. I let you into our social circle. I made you look good at the country club. You made me look like a target, Madison. I snapped. You're 23 years old and haven't held a job for more than a week. That $4,000 dress you wanted? That's more than a teacher makes in a month. You're not a socialite. You're a parasite. Dominic took a step toward me, his face contorted in a mask of desperation and rage. You think a few cameras and some papers make you invincible? This is my home, too. We're married, Scarlett. Half of this place is mine. I actually chuckled, a cold, dry sound that echoed through the high ceilings. That's the funniest thing you've said in years. Check the title deed in that folder, page 4. This penthouse was purchased by the Vanguard Trust, a premarital asset funded by my late grandfather. Our prenuptial agreement, which your own lawyer signed off on, specifically excludes trust-owned real estate from marital property. You have zero equity here. You have zero rights here. You are, quite literally, a guest who has overstayed his welcome. The realization finally hit him. The paper fortress I had built was impenetrable. He wasn't just losing a wife. He was losing his lifestyle, his status, and his warmth. Now, I said, pointing to the grand-grandfather clock in the foyer, 4 minutes left. If you aren't out by the time the chime hits, Marcus hits send on a digital file to the district attorney's office. I wonder how your mother will enjoy a New York City shelter while you're wearing a bright orange jumpsuit at Rikers Island. Dominic looked at the open door, where the snow was already piling up on the hardwood floor, then back at me. For the first time, he saw not his wife, but the CEO who had liquidated 3 competitors in a single year. He saw his executioner. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Dominic looked like a cornered animal, dangerous, desperate, and devoid of any remaining dignity. He didn't move toward the door. Instead, he lunged for the mahogany table, sweeping the heavy crystal vase of lilies onto the floor. It shattered with a deafening crack, water and glass shards spraying across the white marble. You think you're so smart, don't you? He roared, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. You've been plotting this behind my back while I slept in your bed? You're a cold, calculating snake. I learned from the best, Dominic, I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my voice remained a steady frost. Except I didn't steal. I just took back what was already mine. Beatrice was on her knees, not out of grief, but trying to scramble for the bank statements scattered among the wet glass. My jewelry, she wheezed, looking up at me with eyes full of venom. The pearls you gave me for my birthday. The $22,000 vintage watch. They're mine. You can't take them. Those were gifts bought with embezzled funds, Beatrice, I said, looking down at her. Marcus has the records. Technically, they are evidence of Dominic's theft. But if you leave right now, I might forget to mention the jewelry to the police. Consider it your severance package. Madison, meanwhile, was having a full-blown meltdown. She grabbed a heavy decorative sculpture, a $9,000 bronze piece, and raised it over her head. I'll break everything in this house. If we can't have it, nobody can. Drop it, Madison, I commanded. The sensors in this room are connected to a silent alarm. The moment that bronze hits the floor, the NYPD enters with hostile intent authorization. Do you really want to spend the night in a holding cell with mascara running down your face? She hesitated, her arms shaking. The sight was pathetic. A 23-year-old girl holding a piece of art like a club, realizing her world of designer lattes and easy credit was evaporating. She slowly lowered the sculpture, sobbing hysterically. Dominic, however, wasn't done. He stepped over the broken glass, his boots crunching on the shards. He stopped just inches from me. I could smell the expensive scotch and the cheap desperation on his breath. Give me the codes, he whispered, a low, menacing growl. The offshore account. I know you have a backup fund for the firm. Give me the access keys, and we leave quietly. If not, well, the cameras might see a domestic accident before the cops get through the elevator. I felt a cold shiver, but it wasn't fear. It was the final spark of my mercy dying out. You're threatening me? In my own home? After you've already hit me twice? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911. I pressed a single button on an app. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse dimmed to a deep, ominous red, and a high-pitched siren began to pulse through the hidden speakers. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, the sound of a countdown. That's the lockout sequence, Dominic, I said over the noise. In 60 seconds, the elevators are disabled. In 90 seconds, the front door deadbolts from the outside. If you are still inside this apartment when the police arrive, I will press charges for kidnapping, assault, and attempted extortion. You won't just be broke. You'll be buried. You wouldn't, he stammered, his bravado finally cracking. I've already spent $60,000 on legal retainers just to ensure you never see the light of day, I shouted over the siren. Try me! The sight of the red lights and the sound of the siren finally broke them. Beatrice grabbed her knockoff bags, Madison grabbed her fur coat, and Dominic, the man who thought he owned me, looked at the door and ran. But as he reached the threshold, he slipped on the wet marble where the vase had broken. His legs went out from under him and he crashed down hard. I watched as a dark stain of blood began to bloom on the white stone from a gash on his forehead. Karma, I whispered, is a meticulous accountant. Dominic groaned, clutching his bloodied forehead as he struggled to stand. The pulsing red lights of the lockout sequence cast a rhythmic, macabre glow over his face. He looked pathetic, a fallen king in a kingdom of broken glass and stolen dreams. Get up, I said, my voice devoid of even a shred of pity. The clock is ticking, and I'm not calling an ambulance for a trespasser. Beatrice and Madison were already at the door, their arms full of designer coats and mismatched bags. They didn't even look back at him. In the face of true disaster, the family Dominic had built on my dime was every man for himself. "Dominic, come on!" Beatrice shrieked from the hallway. "The elevator is going to lock." With a final venomous glare at me, Dominic scrambled to his feet, leaving a smear of blood on my pristine white marble. He staggered out of the apartment just as the heavy steel door began its automated closing cycle. I stood there, framed by the luxury they had tried to strip from me, and watched the heavy bolt slide into place with a satisfying metallic thud. Silence followed. A silence so heavy it felt physical. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Down on the street, 50 stories below, the Manhattan blizzard was in full force. The wind whipped the snow into blinding white sheets, and the city lights looked like dim, distant ghosts. 10 minutes later, I saw them. 3 small, dark figures emerged from the lobby of my building. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, huddled together against the biting wind. I watched through a pair of high-powered binoculars as Dominic frantically waved for a taxi. But on a night like this, in the middle of a 7-inch snowstorm, empty cabs were non-existent. I saw Madison sobbing, her expensive heels sinking into the slush. I saw Beatrice clutching her coat, her aristocratic posture completely shattered. They were homeless, penniless, and forced to face the reality of the New York winter they had previously only viewed from behind heated glass. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "They're out, Scarlett," he said, his voice calm and professional. "My security team downstairs confirmed they've left the property. The police are filing the report for the assault as we speak. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Marcus," I said, though my hand was shaking as I poured myself a glass of water. "I just need to clean my floors. There's blood on the marble." "Leave it," Marcus advised. "I'm sending a forensic cleaning crew and a new security detail to sit outside your door tonight. Don't touch anything. That blood is evidence if he tries to deny the altercation." "He won't," I replied, looking at the folder still sitting on the table. "He's too busy trying to figure out how to survive the night with the $120 he has left in his pocket. I froze his secondary cards 10 minutes ago." "Good," Marcus chuckled. "Sleep well, Scarlett. Tomorrow, we start the asset recovery. We're going after every cent of that $85,000 he gave to his mistress." I hung up and walked to the master bedroom. For the last 3 years, this room had felt like a battlefield. Tonight, it felt like a sanctuary. I looked at the king-size bed and realized I didn't have to share it with a liar. I didn't have to wake up to the smell of stale scotch and the sound of criticism. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My jaw was swollen, a dark purple bruise blooming across the skin, a 3-inch mark of his love. I touched it gently, the pain a sharp reminder of why I had done this. I wasn't just Scarlett, the wife. I was Scarlett, the survivor. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my laptop. I had work to do. By 8 a.m., I wanted Dominic's face on every industry newsletter in the city. I wanted his theft of corporate funds to be the first thing any potential employer saw when they Googled his name. The eviction was just the beginning. The blizzard outside was cold, but the winter I was about to bring upon Dominic would be eternal. By 3 a.m., the penthouse was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic humming of the HVAC system and the muffled roar of the wind outside. I sat at my mahogany desk, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating the bruise on my face. I wasn't tired. Adrenaline is a powerful substitute for sleep when you're systematically erasing a person from your life. First, I dealt with the digital tether. I logged into our shared home network and began the purge. With a few clicks, I revoked Dominic's access to the smart home system, the high-speed Wi-Fi, and the streaming services he spent all day binging. Next, I moved to the cellular family plan. I saw his phone listed as Dom's iPhone 15 Pro Max, a device I had paid $1,400 for just 3 months ago. I clicked Deactivate Line and Report Stolen. Enjoy the no-service icon, Dominic, I whispered to the empty room. I then navigated to the security portal for my firm. I sent an urgent, high-priority email to my IT department and the building's management office. Subject: Immediate access revocation. Dominic Vance. Effective immediately, Dominic Vance is no longer authorized to enter the building or any offices associated with Vanguard acquisitions. His keycards are to be deactivated. If he is seen on the premises, contact the NYPD immediately. I attached a high-resolution photo of him, the one where he looked charming and successful at our last Christmas party. It was a lie I was no longer willing to tell. Next came the most satisfying part. I opened the bank's business portal. Over the last year, Dominic had grown bold, using a secondary marketing account I'd set up for the firm to pay for his secret life. He thought I didn't check the microtransactions. He was wrong. I had compiled a spreadsheet of every meal, every hotel room, and every piece of jewelry he'd bought for Chloe. I hit Transfer All Funds and moved the remaining $32,000 into a restricted escrow account. I then closed the account entirely. If he tried to buy a cup of coffee tomorrow morning to escape the cold, his card would be declined. A soft knock at the door startled me. I looked at the monitor. It was the security team Marcus had promised. 2 large men in black suits stood in the hallway, looking professional and imposing. I let them in and they took their stations, one by the elevator, one by the service entrance. "Ms. Scarlett, Mr. Marcus sent us," the taller one, Elias, said with a nod. "Nobody is getting in here tonight, and we've already cleared the hallway of the items you left out." "Thank you, Elias," I said. "Where did the items go?" "To the curb, ma'am. The snowplows will likely bury them by morning." I felt a wave of relief. The physical clutter of his existence was gone. Now I just had to survive the psychological aftermath. I walked into the guest room, the room Beatrice had occupied. It smelled of her cloying, expensive perfume and entitlement. I opened the window just a crack, letting the -5 degrees Celsius air rush in to clear the scent. I pulled out a small, old burner phone I'd kept in my safe. I had one more message to send. I had tracked down Chloe's number weeks ago. To Chloe. Dominic has been evicted and fired. His accounts are frozen and his phone is deactivated. He's currently on the street in a blizzard with about $120. If he shows up at your door, just know that the apartment lease in Brooklyn is in his name, but the payments were made with stolen funds. The fraud investigators will be visiting that address within 48 hours. Good luck. I hit send and turned the phone off. I didn't want to see her response. I didn't care if she was a victim of his lies or a willing participant in his theft. She was part of the past I was ghosting. I finally lay down on my bed. The silence was no longer heavy. It was light. For the first time in years, I wasn't listening for the sound of his key in the lock or the heavy footfall that usually signaled an impending argument. I was Scarlett, just Scarlett. As I drifted off to sleep, the last thing I thought about wasn't the hit to my jaw or the money lost. It was the image of my signature on the divorce papers, the most beautiful piece of art I had ever created. The sun rose over Manhattan not with warmth, but with a blinding, frigid glare that bounced off the 8 inches of fresh snow. I woke up at 6 a.m., my body aching but my mind sharper than it had been in years. I checked my phone. 27 missed calls from an unknown number. 6 frantic emails from Dominic's personal account. sent from what I assumed was a public Wi-Fi at a 24-hour diner. "Scarlett, pick up! This isn't funny anymore. My card was declined at the hotel. My phone is dead. Mom is freezing. You can't do this to us." "Scarlett, I'm warning you. If you don't unlock the account, I'm calling the papers." I deleted them without reading the rest. He was still trying to use his warning voice, unaware that he no longer had a throat to scream with. By 9 a.m., I was in the back of my town car, heading to the office. The city was struggling to dig itself out, but for me, the path was clear. When I walked through the glass doors of Vanguard Acquisitions, the atmosphere was electric. My employees knew something was up. The bruise on my face, which I hadn't even bothered to cover with makeup, told a story they didn't dare ask about. "Morning, everyone," I said, my voice projecting across the open plan office. "Today is a day of restructuring. Please check your emails for the new security protocols." I went straight to my private office. Marcus was already there, sipping an espresso and looking over a pile of documents. "He tried to enter the Brooklyn apartment," Marcus said without looking up. "The mistress, Chloe, she wouldn't let him in. Apparently, your text message scared her enough to pack her bags and vanish. Neighbors saw him shouting at the door for 20 minutes before the building security threatened to call the police." "And the money?" I asked, sitting behind my desk. "That's the best part." Dominic tried to visit the Fifth Avenue branch of the bank at 8:30 a.m. He thought he could talk his way into the marketing account. Marcus handed me a tablet. "The branch manager called me. Dominic was making a scene, claiming you had hacked him. When the manager showed him the forensic audit and mentioned the word embezzlement, Dominic bolted. He's a coward, Marcus. He only fights people he thinks are weaker than him." "Well, he's about to find out he's the weakest link in this city," Marcus replied. "I've filed the official complaint with the district attorney. Because the amount exceeds $50,000, it's a Class C felony. They're interested, Scarlett, especially with the video footage of the assault." I leaned back, looking out at the skyline. I want him to feel the walls closing in. I don't want a quick arrest. I want him to spend a few days realizing that every door in this city is locked. Around noon, my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Scarlett, there's a woman on the line. She says her name is Beatrice, and it's a family emergency." "Put it on speaker," I said. Beatrice's voice came through, sounding thin and desperate, stripped of its usual haughty vibrance. "Scarlett, please, we're at a bus station in Port Authority. Madison is sick, and Dominic is... he's not himself. We have nowhere to go. My sister in Jersey won't take us in. Just give us $5,000. That's all. For a deposit on a small place. We'll never bother you again." "5,000, Beatrice?" I asked, my voice cold. "That's funny. That's exactly what you spent on that vintage wine collection last month. The one you insisted I pay for because a home needs a cellar. Why don't you sell the wine?" "You know we couldn't take the wine with us," she sobbed. "Then I suppose you'll have to rely on the social services you used to mock," I said. "I'm sure the Port Authority has excellent resources for the homeless. Don't call this office again. Next time, it goes straight to my legal team." I hung up. I felt a fleeting pang of something. Not guilt, but a memory of the person I used to be. The person who would have sent the money. But then I touched the bruise on my jaw, and the pang vanished, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. Dominic hadn't just lost his money. He had lost his host. The parasite was finally being forced to breathe on its own, and the New York air was very, very thin. The glass-walled conference room of my law firm sat high above the city, overlooking the Grays courthouse. Marcus sat opposite me, surrounded by 5 junior associates and a mountain of digital evidence. The atmosphere was clinical, devoid of the emotional chaos that had defined my life for the past 3 years. Here, the pain was just data. He's been served, Scarlett, Marcus said, sliding a tablet across the sleek table. He was spotted at a low-budget motel in Queens. He tried to pay with a credit card that had been flagged. The police caught up with him in the lobby. He didn't go quietly. I scrolled through the photos. Dominic looked unrecognizable. His hair was matted. His expensive designer coat was stained with slush and salt, and the gash on his forehead from the marble floor was a jagged, dark crust. He was being pressed against a police cruiser, his face twisted in a snarl of impotent rage. "The charges?" I asked. "Domestic assault in the second degree, grand larceny, and 3 counts of identity theft," Marcus replied, his voice a steady drumbeat of consequences. "The identity theft is the kicker. He didn't just spend your money. He opened 3 separate credit lines in your name using your Social Security number while you were asleep, totaling an additional $45,000 in debt." My blood ran cold. I had expected the greed, the infidelity, and the violence, but the systematic theft of my identity was a level of betrayal I hadn't fully processed. He wasn't just living off me. He was trying to hollow me out from the inside. "The DA is offering a plea deal," Marcus continued. "But I told them we aren't interested in leniency. We want the maximum sentence. With the video evidence from the penthouse, the forensic audit, and the testimony from the bank manager, his chances of winning at trial are essentially 0. Suddenly, the phone in the center of the table buzzed. It was a call from the Rikers Island Correctional Facility. "Do you want to take it?" Marcus asked, his eyebrow raised. I hesitated for a second, then hit the speakerphone. Scarlett, you have to help me!" Dominic's voice was stripped of its arrogance, replaced by a frantic, high-pitched desperation. "It's a nightmare in here. They took my clothes, my watch, everything. There's a guy in my cell who—" "I don't care about your cellmate, Dominic," I interrupted, my voice sounding like a gavel strike. "I care about the $130,000 you've stolen from my life. I care about the 3 years you spent gaslighting me while you lived like a king on my dime." "I did it for us!" he screamed, the sound echoing in the sterile conference room. "I was trying to build something. I made mistakes, okay? But you're my wife. You can't let them do this to me. Tell them you dropped the charges. Tell them the money was a gift." "A gift?" I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "A gift usually doesn't come with a bruised jaw and forged signatures." "You aren't a husband, Dominic. You're a failed investment, and today, I am officially liquidating you." "You heartless bitch!" he roared. "Wait until my mother talks to the press. She'll tell everyone how you've been treating us. She'll ruin your reputation." "Beatrice?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "She's currently being questioned for her role in the embezzlement. It turns out that $22,000 watch she was wearing was purchased using a company card he reported as lost. She's an accomplice, Dominic. And Madison? She's currently being evicted from the motel because she tried to steal a guest's luggage. Your family is a crime syndicate, not a household." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the static of the prison phone system. "I gave you my best years," he whispered, a final, pathetic attempt at manipulation. "No," I replied. "You took mine. But the good news is, I'm still young, I'm still rich, and I'm finally free. You, on the other hand, are just a number now." I hit the end call button with a steady hand. I looked at Marcus and his team. "Let's proceed with the civil suit. I want a judgment that follows him for the rest of his life. I want his future wages garnished until the day he dies. I want him to remember my name every time he sees a paycheck." "Consider it done," Marcus said. I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was beginning to melt, revealing the hard, gray pavement of the city. The winter was far from over, but the fire inside me was finally starting to settle into a calm, controlled glow. I wasn't just winning a legal battle, I was reclaiming my soul. A week had passed since Dominic's arrest, and the brutal New York blizzard had transitioned into a miserable, bone-chilling rain. The snow had turned into a thick, gray slush that clogged the gutters of the city. I sat in the back of a nondescript SUV parked across the street from a crumbling tenement building in a forgotten corner of Queens. Marcus had told me where they were. I didn't have to come, but I needed to see it. I needed to witness the final transition from parasites to scavengers. The door to the building opened and two women emerged. Beatrice and Madison looked like ghosts of their former selves. Beatrice was wearing a dirty trench coat that was at least 2 sizes too big, likely a donation from a local shelter. The aristocratic tilt of her chin was gone. She walked with a heavy, defeated slouch, clutching a plastic grocery bag as if it contained diamonds instead of whatever meager scraps they had managed to scavenge. Madison followed behind, her face pale and devoid of the expensive makeup that used to be her armor. She was wearing a pair of old sneakers. Her $1,200 designer boots had likely been sold or stolen days ago. They stood under a rusted awning, waiting for a city bus that was late. I rolled down the window just an inch. The smell of wet asphalt and exhaust filled the car. "They look smaller than I remembered," I whispered. "Poverty has a way of shrinking people, Scarlett," Marcus replied from the driver's seat. "Without your money to inflate their egos, there's nothing left but the hollow shell." I watched as a taxi splashed through a puddle, drenching Beatrice in icy gray water. She didn't scream or throw a fit like she used to. She just stood there, dripping wet, her eyes staring blankly at the street. The woman who used to complain if her Chardonnay wasn't exactly 11 degrees Celsius was now standing in a gutter, and the world didn't care. My phone buzzed with the notification from my private investigator. "Report, Dominic Vance. Subject has been denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of the identity theft charges. He has been moved to a general population wing. Preliminary hearing set for the 15th. I looked back at the two women. Beatrice was arguing with Madison now, likely over the few dollars they had left. Madison was gesturing wildly toward the building, her voice a shrill, desperate sound that carried even through the rain. They were turning on each other. Without me to serve as their common enemy and their source of life, they were devouring themselves. "They're scavengers now," I said, rolling the window back up, "fighting over the remains of a life they never earned." "Are you satisfied?" Marcus asked, putting the car in gear. "I thought I would be," I said, looking at my reflection in the darkened glass. The bruise on my jaw was almost gone, faded to a faint yellow smudge, but the memory of the hit was still sharp. But satisfaction is for people who still care. What I feel is closer to nothing. They are just strangers in the rain. As we drove away, I saw Beatrice look toward our car. For a split second, I thought she recognized the tinted windows. She took a step toward the street, her hand reaching out as if to beg, but we were already moving. She was left behind in the rearview mirror, a tiny, shivering figure disappearing into the New York fog. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the quarterly projections for my firm. My revenue was up by 18% since I had cut the dead weight. The money Dominic had stolen, the $85,000 from the account and the $45,000 in credit debt, was a significant loss, but in the grand scheme of my empire, it was a tax I was willing to pay for my freedom. I realized then that the best revenge wasn't just watching them suffer. It was becoming so successful that their existence became a footnote in my biography. "Drive to the office, Marcus," I said. "I have a meeting at 2 p.m. for a $200,000 expansion. I don't want to be late." The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the blizzard. The city was moving on, and finally, so was I. 1 month later, the New York City skyline felt like it belonged to me. The slush of winter had been replaced by the crisp, biting promise of early spring. I stood in the center of my new satellite office, a 4,000-square-foot glass marvel in Hudson Yards. The smell of fresh paint and expensive leather was the only perfume I needed. "The expansion is complete, Scarlett," Marcus said, walking into my office with a stack of signed contracts. "We've officially acquired the Sterling Group. Your market share just jumped by 22%. The press is calling you the Ice Queen of Acquisitions, and honestly, it suits you." I smiled, tapping a stylus against my tablet. "The ice part is just business, Marcus. People mistake boundaries for coldness when they're used to walking all over you." I looked at the data on my screen. My net worth had surged, far exceeding the losses I had sustained during my marriage. But more importantly, the firm was thriving because the atmosphere was no longer toxic. I had implemented a new integrity protocol. No more hidden accounts, no more blurred lines. "Any news from the other side?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "Dominic's trial is a disaster for him. His public defender tried to argue temporary insanity due to the stress of his failing marriage. The judge almost laughed. The footage of him hitting you is being played on a loop in the courtroom. He's looking at 5 to 7 years in a state penitentiary. No parole." "And the scavengers?" "Beatrice tried to sue you for wrongful eviction and emotional distress. She asked for $50,000 in damages. The court dismissed it in under 10 minutes and sanctioned her lawyer for filing a frivolous suit. Last I heard, she and Madison are working at a commercial laundry facility in New Jersey. They live in a studio apartment that's about 400 square feet. I believe the rent is more than they make in a month." I felt a surge of cold triumph. The woman who once refused to touch her own laundry was now spending 10 hours a day scrubbing linens for strangers. It wasn't cruelty. It was equilibrium. "I received a letter yesterday," I said, pulling a crumpled envelope from my drawer. "From Dominic. From Rikers." Marcus frowned. "You shouldn't be reading his mail." "I didn't," I said, tossing it into the shredder. "I just wanted to see his handwriting one last time. It was shaky, desperate. He's realized that his best years are being spent in a place where his charm has no currency." The shredder hummed, turning his final plea into white confetti. "I'm hosting a gala tonight," I told Marcus. "A fundraiser for survivors of domestic financial abuse. I'm putting up the first $100,000 as a matching grant. I want to make sure that other women have the paper fortress I had before they need it." "You've turned a tragedy into a brand, Scarlett," Marcus remarked with genuine admiration. "No," I corrected him, looking at my reflection in the window. The bruise was gone, replaced by a sharp, defined jawline and eyes that no longer looked for approval. I turned a victim into a victor. There's a difference. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass. Below, the city was a hive of activity, millions of people chasing dreams and avoiding nightmares. For 3 years, I had been one of the people hiding in the shadows of my own home. Now, I was the one casting the shadow. My assistant buzzed. "Ms. Scarlett, the photographer from Forbes is here for your top 40 under 40 cover shoot." "Send them in," I said. I adjusted my blazer, a custom-made piece that cost more than Dominic's remaining life savings. I sat behind my desk, not as a wife, not as a survivor, but as a mogul. The empire wasn't just built on capital. It was built on the ashes of everything that tried to burn me down. Ready for your close-up? The photographer asked, setting up his lights. I've been ready for a long time, I replied. The courthouse air was sterile, a sharp contrast to the humid, gasoline-scented streets of Manhattan outside. Today was the sentencing. I sat in the front row, my back as straight as the skyscrapers I now owned. I wore a suit of deep charcoal, sharp enough to cut, and a pair of sunglasses I didn't take off until the judge entered the room. When they led Dominic in, the room went silent. He was shackled at the wrists and ankles. The heavy chains clinked against the linoleum floor, a rhythmic, metallic reminder of his new reality. He had lost at least 20 pounds. The designer stubble he used to groom so carefully was now a patchy, graying beard. He looked like a man who had finally realized that the world didn't owe him a living. As he was led past me, he stopped. The guards nudged him, but he resisted, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, I saw a flash of the old Dominic, the one who thought he could talk his way out of a hurricane. "Scarlet," he croaked, his voice thin from weeks of screaming in a cell. "Please, look at me. I'm sorry. I'll pay it back. I'll work for you. I'll do anything. Just tell the judge I'm a good man." A good man? I stood up slowly, leaning in so only he could hear me. A good man doesn't forge his wife's name to buy jewelry for a mistress. A good man doesn't hit a woman to feel powerful. You aren't a man, Dominic. You're a debt that has finally been settled. "I loved you," he hissed, his desperation turning into a familiar, ugly venom. "You loved my bank account," I replied. "And now that it's closed to you, you have nothing." The guards pulled him away. The judge, a formidable woman with eyes that had seen every lie in the city, didn't waste time. She reviewed the evidence, the $130,000 in theft, the medical reports of my injuries, and the testimony of the bank officials. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice echoing in the hallowed hall, "you have shown a predatory pattern of behavior, exploiting the very person who supported you. This wasn't a mistake. It was a lifestyle of parasitic cruelty. I sentence you to 6 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised parole. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to the victim, including all legal fees, totaling $215,000. Until this debt is paid, any assets you acquire will be seized." Dominic collapsed back into his chair. 6 years. By the time he got out, he would be 40, broke, and a convicted felon. His best years were now the property of the state of New York. In the gallery, I saw Beatrice and Madison. They weren't crying for Dominic's cell. They were crying for themselves. They were sitting in the back, looking like shadows. When the sentence was read, Beatrice let out a soft moan and buried her face in her hands. She knew the gravy train hadn't just crashed. It had been vaporized. I walked out of the courtroom before the guards could even lead Dominic away. I didn't need to see him cry. I didn't need to hear the clink of the chains again. Outside, Marcus was waiting by the car. The spring sun was warm on my face, a gentle, healing heat. "It's over, Scarlett," he said, opening the door. "The judgment is filed. The restitution order is in place. He's officially a ghost." "No, Marcus," I said, looking up at the sky. "He's a lesson, and I've graduated." We drove back toward Hudson Yards. I checked my phone. A new notification from my firm's app popped up. Quarterly profit exceeded projections by 15%. New acquisition target identified. I looked at my hands. They were steady. The bruise was long gone, but the strength it had forged in me was permanent. I had started this journey as a woman who was afraid to go home. I was ending it as a woman who owned the city. I leaned back against the leather seat and watched the city blur past. The skyscrapers, the lights, the endless motion. It was all mine to navigate now. I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to be happy, and I certainly wasn't waiting for anyone to cook my dinner. As we crossed the bridge, I took the small gold wedding band, the last piece of him I still carried, and dropped it into the cup holder. I'd give it to the first charity bin I saw. It was just a piece of metal after all, and I had a kingdom to run. The last supper of lies was over. It was time for a new feast. Never let your kindness be mistaken for weakness. Being a provider doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. Financial independence is your ultimate power. Keep your heart soft, but your boundaries ironclad. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it inspired you to stay strong and stand your ground. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss our next powerful story.